The national economy is indeed a service or a decisive point for the country to successfully monopolize the trade sector. So, an expert economist said that the goods and services tax, which is GST, is better than the current sale and services tax, which is SST, in contributing to government coffers. So, the GST rate offered shows double the tax revenue compared to the SST, and more than 170 countries around the world implement some form of value-added tax system similar to this GST tax system. However, according to the Apurva Sanghi 2022, he is the chief economist of Bank Negara Malaysia, who stated that the GST rate offered shows double the tax revenue compared to the SST system. So, the government must spend to help or subsidize the low-income group if it wants to reintroduce the GST system. Such that the country's economy is indeed of a point of determination for the country to successfully monopolize the trade sector. However, a tax system covering more sectors and industries is needed to present and prevent leakage or tax evasions, adding that such system will increase government revenue. So next, I will move to the next presenter.
Now, I'm going to explain to you on the GST problem. The first problem of GST is its impact on the cost of living, where it tends to lead to the higher prices for the goods and services because business might pass on extra tax into the consumer. This can lead to the consumer to change their spending habits. When price increase, people tend to look or seek for the cheaper alternative. From this spending habit of the consumer itself could affect the business and also the economy itself, and can lead to the inflations to happen in our country. Now we move to the second point of GST problem, which is GST impact on vulnerable group. Those with lower income households such as B40 need to spend biggest portion of money to get the daily basic essentials such as foods and also clothing. Since we all know that GST applies to most of the goods and services, it can make the basic needs more expensive, and of course from this it can put more pressure to this targeted group in order to buy their needs and to fulfill the basics. Third problem of GST is it affected small and medium business because they need to handle more paperwork and to keep on track with the taxes. This can be time consuming, and of course it will confuse the business owner a bit, and other than that, they might face high costs for the things that they need to run the business smoothly, such as they need to buy raw material to produce the product for the consumer. Of course, they need to pay extra charge because GST included, right? So this can decrease their profit. Decrease their profit because the business tend to pay more from what they need. And of course, if the business make a mistake in their tax calculations, they will need to face penalties or fines by the government itself. And for the last point of GST problem is it could increase cost of goods and services, where business need to pay GST on the things they buy to make the products, and they often pass this cost into the consumer by rising up the prices itself. And what if the GST rates increase from 10% to 12%? Of course, the prices for the goods and services will be directly increased too, right? So this can put pressures on the group targeted above that I mentioned before, and it also can affect the business itself because they need to maintain the prices so that they have a consumer for that. And it also can be included that from above 4 points that I stated now, that GST could be burdensome to some targeted people or business because it will have higher prices and they need to pay for the extra money for that. And now we're going to move to the next presenter on the implications.
Now we move to the positive implication. The first one is increased government expenditure. Reintroduction of GST will benefit the government by increasing income of the country. This is because GST is a consumption tax, which is we pay it when we spend. According to this paper, taxing consumption is more profitable because it contributes for 60% of the GDP. In Malaysia, the implementation of GST is designed to boost revenue collection and lower the nation's growing budget deficit, which could raise the standard of living among Malaysians. As evident, in 2017, the GST collection exceeded RM40 billion. So this large amount was then returned to the people through a variety of projects and programs, which is aimed at strengthening the country, such as to modernizing infrastructure, improving public transport, and others. Aside from that, the implementation of GST may diminish the reliance on direct taxation as the primary source of revenue. GST, secondly, positive impact on fair pricing to consumer. Basically, the supply chain network for business transaction consists of manufacturers, suppliers, warehouse, distribution center, dealers, and others. So, in order to avoid double taxation, the government will evaluate GST on the value added at each stage of the change in order to allow customers to pay fair prices for most goods and services. As we can see, following the implementation of GST, 273 products that were previously subject to 10% SST are now subject to 6% of GST. The input tax credit mechanism is very important in order to prevent double taxation. And now we move to the negative implication, which is the first one is administrative problem towards business entity. So the adoption of GST signifies the new tax system that requires detailed information on each component of the distribution chain. As a result, a large number of documents are required to comply with the new system procedure and requirement. This is a typical challenge for any organization. As a result, they may require time not just to become familiar with the entire system, but also to re-evaluate their ways in order to control emergent challenges. So, GST system sometimes includes several tax rates, exclusion, and compliance requirements that are very difficult for small firms in order to understand. Lastly, negative implication, which is regresses effect. So according to the newspaper, the lower income groups tend to bear the burden of taxation because GST is a consumption tax, and this individual group of people are required to spend a more proportion of the income on the consumable products. Not only that, GST also applies the same tax rate to all customers regardless of their income level. Indirectly, they were forced to pay higher taxes. As a result, this high tax rate will limit their purchasing power because people start to question its benefits once they perceive that it increased the price of products and services.
Next, we move to the recommendation of this issue. The first recommendation, of course, introduce progressive GST rate that exempt or apply lower rate to essential goods and services such as food, healthcare, and public transportation to minimize the impact on the household expenses. The recommendation involves implementing a tiered GST structure exempting essential goods like rice, bread, and also vegetable from GST, while applying a standard rate to non-essential items such as luxury goods. For the second recommendation is implementing targeted cash transfer program or rebate schemes. This program is to provide financial assistance to low-income households affected by the increased cost of living due to GST. For example, introduce a GST rebate program for low-income families where eligible households receive a quarterly cash rebate to offset the GST paid on essential goods and services. The rebate amount could be based on the household income and sizes. This targeted assistance helps vulnerable groups manage their expenses effectively. The third recommendation is to provide threshold exemptions or reduced GST rate for small businesses to minimize the impact on their operating costs and promote entrepreneurship and growth. For example, introduce a GST threshold where businesses with annual turnover below a certain threshold are exempt from GST registration and filing requirement. This threshold could be set at a level that exempts most SMBs from GST obligations. And last recommendation is enhancing enforcement and monitoring. Investing in a comprehensive enforcement method and monitoring capabilities will prevent tax fraud, guarantee compliance with GST regulation, and preserve tax income, minimizing the benefit of transitioning to GST. For example, establish a dedicated anti-profiling authority empowered to investigate and penalize businesses found to be unfairly raising prices post-GST. By ensuring fair pricing practices, consumers are protected from exploitation despite the higher tax burden.
In conclusion, the Goods and Services Tax, or well-known as GST, offers several advantages over the previous Sale and Services Tax, or well-known as SST. It is because it promotes transparency, as GST simplifies the tax system by consolidating multiple taxes into a single tax structure, reducing the complexity and improving transparency compared to SST. The GST also covers a broader range of goods and services compared to SST, leading to a more comprehensive tax base and potentially increase the government revenue as it boosts the economy, because as we know, previously our country once collected the GST for almost 42 billion, which 2 times higher than SST revenue, and the GST will definitely be used for population, which is the people. This can benefit both government and people. Overall, GST provides a more efficient, transparent and fair tax system compared to SST, benefiting business, consumer and the economy at large scale.